I've been getting asked, Daniel, where is your monthly best GPUs to buy at each price point video? You do one every single month. And the problem is I've been trying to make one, but there is nothing to talk about other than the fact that you shouldn't buy a GPU right now. And honestly, sometimes you couldn't even if you wanted to. I usually use PC Part Picker to sort pricing because they survey a ton of major retailers all at once, and I can sort prices low to high and get an idea of where the market is at each price point. That's my strategy for making those videos. And the problem is right now, if I search PC Part Picker for 5090, literally nothing shows up in stock. There's some third-party sellers, but they're listing at massive scalper pricing. If I look for a 5080, the few that show up in stock are starting at $2,000 and going up from there. If I look for, what about a last-gen GPU? You know, the 4080 Super isn't much slower than a 5080. Well, that's coming in at $1,750. You could buy a PNY, is that pronounced Peony or PNY? I don't know. Anyway, I don't hear it out loud. 4080 Super a few months ago for $950, like below the $1,000 MSRP. So buying a 5080 or a 4080 Super right now at $1,750 or $2,000 for 5080 is ridiculous compared to just a few months ago. If I look for a 4080 non-Super, again, it's coming in around, well, honestly, they're more expensive than the 4080 Supers I'm seeing here. It looks like $1,850 on that one. What if I just want to go to step down, like 4070 Ti Super? Oh, looks like those are $1,300 right now. What about a 4070 Ti non-Super? Oh, that's only $1,100. Guys, that was a discontinued product at $800 that got replaced by the 4070 Ti Super, which, anyway. What if we wanted a 4070 Super? That was $900. This thing was selling for $600 or a little bit less on a regular basis for months. What about a 4070 non-Super? These had been going for about $550 to $515 if you got a good sale for a number of months. Now you're paying $700. What if I wanted a 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte if we want to keep going down the stack? Oh, $730. Guess they're not still producing those. What about the 8 gigabyte version? $440. This is the closest thing to an MSRP card we've seen so far, and it's still $40 above the original MSRP and also higher than it had been selling for, where it had been a little bit below MSRP for a while on a pretty regular basis. I have to go all the way down to a 4060 to get an MSRP card at $295. Ignore this $179 model. Occasionally you have to deal with scam Amazon listings affecting pricing. Anyway, so that one's not real. Anyway, about $300 on a 4060. So we just went through the entire 40 and 50 series lineup, and there's nothing close to MSRP besides a 4060. Now we could talk about AMD pricing in just a second, but some of you might be wondering, okay, what is going on? I mean, there is the 50 series launching and selling out, and I mean, that's not completely unusual, although supply has seemed pretty low. But generally, high-end GPUs selling out when they first launch isn't anything extraordinary. Another thing that happened here is that the supply of 40 series cards, at least at the upper end above the 4060 level, has been drying up because they're stopping to produce them so that they're not directly competing with the 50 series on the market. So you're not trying to sell the previous generation and the current generation at the same time. But then there's also things like tariffs hitting, at least in the United States. Now, whether those have actually caused supply prices to go up or whether it's just being used as an excuse is another matter. Tariffs get paid at the time something is imported into the country. So new shipments coming in now from China will be being hit with a 10% tariff because we now have a 10% tariff on China. And not every GPU comes out of a Chinese factory at this point. But anyway, and this is also just affecting the United States. But that doesn't mean that companies won't already use that plus the scarcity as an excuse to raise prices. I found this article at PC Mag saying Newegg confirms tariffs are to blame for 5080 and 5090 GPU price hikes. Whether that's the real reason or just an excuse, who knows? Now, the reason was apparently a tweet saying that our GPUs are from China as a reason there, and also replying to a user saying, yeah, it's tariffs. Now, interestingly, this article's a couple of days old, and the tweets are not showing up now. So did Newegg remove those because it wasn't true, or just because it was a bad look to say that? Who knows? But we're also having the AIB partners themselves. Like Asus, for example, we just saw a headline saying that their only card for 5080s that was supposed to cost the $999 MSRP has now been raised to $1265. Now, this is not because of scalpers. This is on ASUS's own website. This is first-party sales directly from ASUS's own website. Although you still can't even buy it at that price right now, it's out of stock. So that's going crazy. It's even worse on the 5090s. Those are going even higher. And again, that's directly from those retailers. And again, if it's a 10% tariff coming from China, then even if we believe that the GPUs, the new shipments will be coming and will be impacted by that tariff, 10% of 1,000 is 100. So if you even wanted to justify it like that, this is still too high to be completely justified by a tariff. And also, the tariff I don't think is paid on what the retail price of the card is in the country. I think it's paid on more of the actual bill of material, the value of the product. I think to the company importing it. Anyway, I don't know the details on tariffs and exactly how that gets paid, but the point is, 10% of 1,000 isn't 265. So you can't just blame that. Some of this is just, I think, companies looking at the fact that, look, they're here for profit. And if people are showing in the scalping market that they're willing to pay more for these, then these companies are going to charge more for them so that they get the cut of the additional price rather than it just being sold at MSRP to a scalper who then resells it at a higher price. And I can't say I blame companies for wanting to maximize their profit, like they have a fiduciary responsibility to do so. But it's still extremely frustrating from a consumer perspective. And again, if I'm trying to make a best GPUs to buy for the month video, I don't have a lot to say other than this rant about GPU pricing and the fact that, again, when do we expect anything interesting to happen or change? Well, later this month, this is another reason I've been hanging off on these videos, is usually when new GPUs launch, it kind of resets what, the amount of frames per dollar you can expect. Now, the 50 series hasn't really been pushing the boundaries on frames per dollar quite as much as we usually get from a new generation, especially if you look at the actual market pricing versus MSRP. But in general, it's often a good idea to hold off until new products have launched and see how that's impacted pricing, because usually a new generation will push down the value of the older ones. But anyway, whether we see that happen or not, with all this other factors playing in, we'll have to see. But we are expecting the 5070 Ti on February 20th. Now, this is not official from Nvidia, but videocards.com has been reporting that as their own inside information for a while now, and they're now saying that they're getting even more confirmation of that from retailers listing 5070 Ti model and saying it's coming soon, available on February 20th. Now, regardless of whether the 20th is exactly the correct date, keep in mind that NVIDIA themselves has said that these are coming in February. So at some point in February, we're getting a 5070 and 5070 Ti. So we just know it's before the month is over. So it's coming soon in the next few weeks. And again, that's probably why we're seeing cards like the 4070 and 4070 Super unavailable anywhere near MSRP. They stopped shipping new shipments of those a while back so that the 5070 and 5070 Ti wouldn't be directly competing with those, because honestly, everything we've seen even from NVIDIA's own claims is that they aren't going to be much faster than what you already had from the 40 series, other than the new multi-frame gen feature and a few percent. So there's that. Now, as far as, again, if you actually are wanting to buy something right now, I will say that it'll be even longer before we get a 5060. And right now, 4060s are at least at their MSRP of $300 for the most part, rather than costing way above that. And then there's also the AMD option. So how about we go up the stack from AMD? A 7600 is still available at $250. 7600 XT, that's the 16 gigabyte version with a little bit of kind of an overclock, a tiny bit more performance, plus double the VRAM at $330. So this pricing isn't great, but it's not far off from the normal pricing that we've seen for a while. How about the 7700 XT? That's coming in at $410. I've certainly seen it listed for less in the past, but again, compared to the other the pricing we're seeing from NVIDIA right now, the AMD pricing doesn't seem to have gone as completely out of control, at least at this tier. The 7800 XT I'm seeing available, looks like at $540, but again, you could get these as low as like $450 over like kind of the Black Friday-ish and Christmas time period. So it's already starting to get into kind of, that doesn't really seem like that great of a deal anymore. And we're about to get a 5070 at about this price. So again, that doesn't look great. And then what about like the 7900 GRE? Well, those are gone. What about the 7900 XT? $950. So in other words, they're basically gone because they had been available much lower. So supply is drying up here. What about the XTX? Gone, $1,300. So again, what this is really looking like here is AMD's kind of doing the same thing, which is as they prepare for their launch of their 9070 and 9070 XT, they're stopping the production of the cards that will be directly competing in those same, pricing tiers, at least-ish. Now, we don't really know where the 9070 and 9070 XT are going to be priced yet. We're expecting to hear about that in the next few weeks, probably after Nvidia launches their 5070 and 5070 Ti so that they can then have a direct comparison in performance and price. That's likely what's happening with that. But again, the fact that the 7900 XTX is drying up, the 7900 XT is drying up, and even the 7900 GRE is drying up, kind of indicates that we'll probably be somewhere in that performance class. Now, whether it's the same price class, that's interesting. Again, 7800 XTs are also kind of drying up at reasonable pricing. And those were, $500 MSRP cards. So are we going to be getting the 9070, 9070 XT somewhere in that $500 plus kind of segment? I mean, it's possible. We don't really know. So anyway, this is the best I can do for you when it comes to a best GPUs to buy video. If you're focused on new pricing, the only stuff that hasn't gone insane are cards like the 7600, 7600 XT, and maybe the 4060. Everything else has kind of gone crazy from here. Let's check in on where Intel's doing before we go. How about that B580? Yeah, the problem with the B580s ever since they launched is that they've been way above their MSRP. They're only interesting as 4060 and 7600 competitors if they are priced aggressively like their MSRP was. If they're above their MSRP, they're really not worth it. And the B570 had been available for several days at its MSRP originally, but again, has kind of dried up since then. So yeah, that's where we're at with things right now. So, I mean, if you're buying something at the low end, maybe even like an RX 6600, something like that, these are priced about the same place they have been for a long time. They might eventually get supplanted by something like a 5060, but we don't know how much that thing's gonna cost, right? So all I can say is it's probably best to wait if you have something reasonable, and if you are buying something right now, at the low end, maybe it's not a ridiculous deal compared to what we've had for the last few months, but everywhere else, it's looking pretty bad, guys. Maybe check out the used market and things like that and see if that's doing any better. But as far as the new market goes, we got to hope for better supply soon and hope for things to kind of calm down on the new GPU launch excitement and all that. Hopefully tariffs don't keep things bad. We'll have to see what happens with all of that. But I hope all of you still manage to have an excellent day.